Hello, and welcome to part 4 of Shakespeare Speaking the Speech. Today we're going to be looking at the prologue from Henry V. Now remember, you want to print your handout from the description below. You also want to be warmed up and ready, so remember to watch our warm-up video to get ready for this one. Also, we're going to be focusing on a lot of things we've already talked about in parts 1 through 3. So I highly encourage you to start this series from the beginning and work along with us until you get back to this point. So let's talk about Henry V. This is a history play, the first one that we're going to talk about. History plays featured heavily in Shakespeare's canon of works. Generally, he wrote about the various kings of England, and they chronologically work up to the current era. Historical figures were considered very appropriate subjects for entertainment of the day. First of all, it was a great way to educate the masses who might not have been paying attention in their history classes. Second of all, it was a really good way to get in good with the current nobility and the current monarch who was in power, Elizabeth I, by telling history in a way that was either favorable to the crown or legitimized the current monarch. Now, it was starting to pass into memory at this point, but England had been through a series of civil wars called the War of the Roses, where the seat of England, that king, had kind of passed hands between a couple different families. Now, of course, most nobility families are related, so you could trace your way back to the old monarch one way or another. But creating these history plays, and especially focusing on the reigns of the Henrys, remember Elizabeth's father was Henry VIII, was a good way to feel and reinforce this lineage. Even if Henry VIII wasn't a direct descendant of Henry V, they still were related. They still were all a part of history. There was a great need to kind of rewrite history, and this is an impulse we still see today. Now, the focus of a prologue was sometimes employed, sometimes not. Often in Shakespeare plays, you're going to get either a messenger or you're going to get maybe two people far away kind of calling to each other. There was no real way to sort of start things. They didn't have an orchestra. They couldn't dim the lights. Everything was actually done outdoors in the daytime. So there were two ways to kind of shush everybody up and get them to pay attention. One was to sort of have two people yelling at each other, essentially. So it's like, oh, hey, there's something going on. Let's look at the stage. Or you actually have someone come out and address the audience. And this is what we're going to do in this prologue. Now, you should have your handout. And you see we have marked everything for you here. Now, you've learned in parts 1 through 3 how to mark this. This is blank verse. It doesn't rhyme, but it is a iambic pentameter. I want you to go through and mark it for yourself, find where the beats and the pauses are. There are in here some extra beats in here. And the whole purpose of these is for you to have to pause, to fill in those empty spaces. So find those and then come back and we'll actually look at the text. Now let's take a look at the text. We are not playing a character here so much as we are playing the chorus. We are the one who has been designated by the theater company to come out and to talk to the audience, to bring them in. Henry V deals mainly with young King Henry's battle at Agincourt in France, which ended up being a success. So this is a play about a war, about a battle. And that was never going to be able to be realized in this theater setting. This is really the first time we were going to look at the Shakespeare theater and what their limitations were. So as I said before, the theaters were done usually during the day and they were open air. So what we're looking at is a round space where you have a stage on one side, and the stage is actually raised like this because most people, the groundlings, stood on the ground. So if the stage was raised, it was easier for them to see everybody who was on stage. And then you had boxes all the way around where people could pay a little bit more money and they would be away from, the riffraff and the rabble down below, and they could watch and enjoy the play. And that was it. There were some costumes, very few. There was no lighting, there was no special effects, pyrotechnics. That was it. It was just a bunch of actors and the words that Shakespeare had written for them. So sometimes that's fine. And especially the way Shakespeare likes to write, as we have talked about, it's very easy to let your imagination go along with you when you're watching this play. It's a little harder when you're talking about a giant battle with swords and horses and smoke and fire and all sorts of stuff. So the big purpose of this chorus's prologue is to entreat the audience to really ask them to play along with us. And this is very clearly written out in lines like, within this wooden O. Theaters were oftentimes referred to as O's because they were circular. The very casks that did affright the air at Agincourt. Since a crooked figure may attest in little place a million, let us on your imaginary forces work. Suppose within the girdles of these walls are confined to mighty monarchies, England and France. So we're going through, and the chorus is describing each little thing. So divide into 1,000 parts, divide on man, which means when there's this one guy, just imagine he's like a ton of soldiers. Imagine when we're talking about horses that we're actually riding horses. Play with us and really make this come to life. Now, ultimately, this is the goal of any actor, not to, be a star or not to have everybody say, oh, wow, you're so great, but to really play on the imagination of your audience, to take them on a journey. The whole point of theater is that it is collaborative. We work with one another on stage, and we work with our audience to create this story. Live theater cannot be what it is without an audience. So with all that in mind, I want you to go through here. I want you to find all those opportunities where you can play on your audience's imagination, where you can lead them, guide them, show them through example how much fun it is to play the scene. Now with that in mind, let's take a look at one way you can play the prologue from Henry V.
Oh, for a muse of fire that would ascend the brightest heaven of invention, a kingdom for a stage, princes to act, and monarchs to behold the swelling scene. Then should the warlike Harry, like himself, assume the port of Mars, and at his heels, leashed in like hounds, should famine, sword, and fire crouch for employment. But pardon, gentles all, the flat, unraised spirits that have dared on this unworthy scaffold to bring forth so great an object. Can this cockpit hold the vasty fields of France? Or may we cram within this wooden O the very casks that did affright the air at Agincourt? Oh, pardon, since a crooked figure may attest in little place a million. And let us, ciphers to this great accompt, on your imaginary forces work. Suppose within the girdles of these walls are now confined 2 mighty monarchies, whose high upreared and abutting fronts the perilous narrow ocean parts asunder. Place out our imperfections with your thoughts. Into 1,000 parts, divide on man, and make imaginary puissance. Think when we talk of horses, that you see them, printing their proud hooves in the receiving earth. For 'tis your thoughts that now must deck our kings. Carry them here and there, jumping o'er times, turning the accomplishment of many years into an hourglass. For the which supply, admit me, chorus to this history, who, prologue-like, your humble patience pray, gently to hear, kindly to judge our play.
So thank you for joining us for part 4 of Shakespeare Speaking the Speech. We'll be back next week for part 5. Until then, keep practicing your monologues and remember to send them to me. The link for the email is down below. Remember to get your parents' permission before you send us a video, but we'd love to see what you're working on. Until next time, we'll see you later.